Hey guys, how's it going? It's Talamic here with DNB Academy, and today I want to take a look at resampling basses. This is something that I sort of worked out and taught myself. I was aware that it was a technique that people were using, but it's sort of been figured by trial and error. And I would imagine that's the case with a lot of producers now, is that their approach to this will be different depending on the style they make and how they figured out how to do it, basically. And so I'll show as broad a range of different kind of techniques as I can as we go, and then hopefully you'll take elements of that and use that in your own processes. You could also just copy me step for step, but further down the line, as you develop your own style and your own sound, there should be elements here that you should be able to use. So I've got this pack here from the Alex pack from DNB Academy. So it's just like a straight bass in D. There's no kind of pitch modulation and stuff. Pitch modulation wouldn't necessarily be a problem, and I'll show you how you can get around that in a second, but it's quite easy if you've just got static notes and stuff. So I'm going to be using Simpler for this rather than Sampler. This is in Ableton. You could obviously do this in Contact or any other kind of sampler, the XS24 if you're in Logic, for example, will work fine. But I'm dragging it into Simpler, and the reason we use Simpler, or I use Simpler, is because a lot of the parameters are easily assignable to a macro, which isn't the case in Sampler. Sampler is great for like multi-sample instruments and more natural sounding stuff because you've got a lot of control if you're using multiple samples in one sampler. Simpler is great for stuff like this, where you're just messing up one sound and we're not stacking samples or adjusting kind of key centers and stuff. So I'm just going to turn the volume up, and we're going to mute that channel for now. So I'm just going to draw out a long note. We'll draw an F. And the first thing we need to do is drag in a tuner. And then I'm actually going to put a limiter on the master. There we go. And we're going to drag in a pitch shifter. And I'm just going to adjust that. So I can see on the tuner that that's playing an F. And we can see here that that's an F there. So I know they're now aligned, and whatever note I play in MIDI is going to match the sample. The reason that I'm using the pitch control here and not the pitch control within the sampler over here is because we're going to actually map that to a macro and use that for any pitch bends and stuff. So let's bring up our macro controls and start messing around. So I'm going to assign the start point of the loop. It's not actually looping in any way, shape or form at the moment, but by mapping the start point, we can change the start of the sample. If I move that around. And there are subtle, very subtle in this instance, but there are subtle variations as we start in different points of the sample. And so you can create like slight variations in interest just by moving that around. The next thing that we're going to go to is go to the controls and map the transpose option to number 2. And you can see that we can sort of control the pitch just by moving that dial around. The next thing that I want to do is to match the pitch envelope controls. So we're going to go pitch, and then we're just going to map the decay. I'll map the decay to 4 and the pitch envelope to 3, so that we can then set you can hear that we can then adjust that. If I set that to 24, for example, we can create some kind of kick-like starts to our bass. If I set that to 12 and set it, or 24 and quite short, for example, versus without, you can hear it adds like an attack to the start of the sample, which can be helpful. And I believe that's everything. As a quick note, we're going to adjust the voices to 1 so that it's mono. And as I mentioned, if you are dealing with a pitched sample, you can actually create loops around where you're dealing with. Which can also create some cool sounds. If you can hear that it obviously loops faster if it's playing a higher pitch, and you can get some cool sort of Reese sounds out of that as well. That's not what we'll be doing here, but it's something that is worth paying attention to if you're into that. You can also create fades on loops to sort of crossfade the start and end so it removes any clicks. I quite like clicks. It depends on the sound. Sometimes you will want to fade it because a click just won't sound good. When you're dealing with something where it's got that harsh top end anyway, if you're introducing kind of clicky artifacts, I quite like stuff that's being resampled sounding like it's being resampled. It's just a preference thing. Cool, so we've got that, and now we can go in. If I drag in some drums very quickly. Cool, so I've got some drums in here now. Just a quick break. And we'll just duplicate that over. And now I want to create some kind of cool little bass fills and stuff. So let's maybe put one here. We'll just hold an F. And then we'll do another one over here. And actually we'll just leave that for now. Cool, so one thing that we can do with our start point is assign an LFO. So we'll go max for live, audio effects, LFO. Map that to the start point, offset it so that it's on the left hand side, and remove the depth a bit just so we're moving it around at the start, and then set it to random and slow that rate down. Smooth it out so that it's like more of a softer LFO, and that means that it will just start in a slightly different place. Annoyingly, let's adjust that depth a little bit more so we can get away with that a bit more. There you go, you heard a few different kind of tones there, so that will work. And then we will adjust pitch to create some nice little pitch variations. So let's move that. And again, starting here, and then we'll go down. Nice. And then for that second one, let's introduce a pitch envelope as well. And in fact, if we're introducing a pitch envelope here, let's add a rhythm as well. So because we've got that kicky, okay, so that's kind of the base, the basic idea setup, and this is where we start messing around basically. So the first thing I want to do is introduce some filters. So I'm going to do 3 filters. Let's try this. We'll do a notch filter, and this is where, you know, it becomes quite experimental and more taste-based, but it also starts getting far more interesting. Nice, and then we'll do a broad band pass, and I'll group that with a low pass. So we're going to map both of those frequencies to a macro. So we've got control over both. And then we're going to adjust. So if I click map, I'm just going to raise, let's rename these just so I can see what they are more clearly when we go to edit. I'm then going to raise the frequency of the low pass a little bit, so it's higher than the band pass. So I think I've covered this in a video before, but if not, or if you've not seen any of that before, the way that I tend to approach bandpass filters is to tone the highs down even more. So you've got your bandpass sort of open slope. We've got 12 dB on here, so it's a little bit softer than a sharper 24 dB slope. Broader, we leave the low end side more open, and we cut the top end off with a low pass. So it's almost like 24 dB on the high end and 12 dB on the low end. Think of it basically as you're just cutting off those higher frequencies a little bit harsher than you would be otherwise. And then we automate this. So and then here, let's do obviously we're cutting off quite a lot in general, like we're losing a lot of that the sound, but we're going to be bringing that back with distortion and multiband compression. So let's just see the transpose on a separate channel so that when I'm doing this I can just see. Oh. Cool, that will do for now. You can obviously endlessly mess around with this, but for the sake of example, let's add OTT. Cool, and then I'm going to add a glue compressor just to bring the volume up. I really like this last little section. Let's just work on this for now. I tend to find that as you go, different parts will work and different ones won't. So, but let's focus on this, and then we can kind of hear how it all sounds. Let's add some trash. Trash is great. If you don't have trash, they often sell it for like stupid prices. They gave it away for free at some point, I think, over lockdown. But if I turn the multiband on, do a little bit of wave shaping on the low end, so a little bit of drive. Let's try saturation instead. And then we'll do something much heavier on the top end. So let's go fuzz. Cool. So before trash and after. Just as reference, before any processing at all. It's got a little bit more character to it. I tend to compress quite a lot, so let's get another multi-band compression on there. And then we've got kind of a bit of noise coming from trash, but let's add a bit more. Cool. We can add some more filters. So let's do a bandpass, a notch, and then a third bandpass. This is another combination of filters that I quite like to use. So I don't tend to worry too much about losing sub either, just because I tend to layer these over basses, and so I don't worry too much. But if you wanted, you can have like a separate channel, so you could group all of these effects together as one. Set, in fact I'll show you very quickly. Group all of that, go back to this start chain, create another, and then at the start of this first chain, add a multiband dynamics. This doesn't do anything by default, but if I turn the high off and copy that to the low chain as well, and then on this chain we solo the mids, on this one we solo the lows, we still have that low weight without, like, so this is our lows and then this is our mids. You can do that kind of thing as well. You could also do that further along, so like if you wanted to keep the low end in as you're distorting and everything else, which is, you know, makes total sense, right? Because you're then driving the low end into the distortion, and that will then change everything's sound. Put this at the end of your chain instead. Take the low end out right at the end. You know, but we're not going to do that for this instance because I'm not too concerned about that. So, and then this one this should help bring some of the low end back anyway, if you were kind of worried about that. But do another OTT, and this always becomes about like stacking and experimenting as well. Glue compressor into a soft clipper. So let's mess around with this one a little bit more. And you know, you could like copy trash, where is it? Or even move it, so let's move trash right after all of this. Cool, and then maybe erosion as well. Let's take both of those elements and move them after trash. Cool, so we've got like a nice, which came through, and you can then, you know, bounce that out as audio, and even edit that further. So, you know, just rearranging the audio is its own form of resampling. You know, doing something like that, you know, is cool. And then you can, you know, so there's so much sort of possibility and room with it. As you can see as well, there's a lot of like trial and error. There are some people, I'm sure, who are very precise when they're resampling, and like every little process and automation is exact. For me, it's like, let's try this and see what happens. The worst comes to the worst, I can delete effects, undo things, go back, etc, etc. And so there's always room to like reverse any changes. Basically, I always keep, when I'm doing the actual process, I always keep all the channels. And you can like group these all together as well and like hide it if you're worried about messing your project. But yeah, there you go. Any questions, let us know, and I'll see you in the next one.